All right, welcome to the 503 line. This is episode 2. We didn't get canceled in our first week.
Yep. And this week we're going to talk about Max Light Rail.
Yeah. So before we get into that, we have a couple things we wanted to cover. The first is they're both upcoming disruptions. The first is to Max on the east side. So on October 12th, which is this coming Sunday, all lines between Rose Quarter and Gateway, so through the Banfield section, are going to be disrupted. So there's going to be a shuttle bus for that. And then the 13th through the 18th, so Monday through, Saturday? Yeah, Monday through Saturday, Red Line will be disrupted between Gateway and the airport. And then they'll be running shuttle buses for that. So it looks like on the 12th, they're doing some electrical work, I think related to the 82nd Avenue platform reconstruction.
Yeah, it said they're removing scaffolding, which made me think at first, they're opening the new station because they're taking down that janky-ass staircase to get down to the platform. But nope, not that. They're not going to open it for a while.
Yeah, I don't see it on this, what we're looking at right now, but I think it's a couple more months.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then 13th to the 18th, the Red Line disruption, they're going to replace some of the curved rail in that really tight fish hook that now just the northbound trains headed to the airport use, but used to be both directions. And It looks like they're also replacing some rail near the Cascade station, which we actually saw when we did the speed run. We saw that rail.
Yeah, it was sitting right next to the track, ready to go.
Yeah, so they've got that prepared. So they're also going to deep clean some stations, clear litter in the track, clean the ballast, and replace some rail ties.
The second big disruption is the Broadway Bridge is going to close for 6 months starting in October.
Yeah. So this also starts on Monday. So they're replacing the lift spans on the deck. So that means the deck is going to close to all vehicles. The only thing that's going to remain open is the south sidewalk.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that means the streetcar is going to be disrupted since they cross over the Broadway Bridge, or at least the A and B loops do.
Yeah.
So this says they're going to operate as one line.
Looks like it's going to make like a U shape.
Yeah. The only station that will not be serviced is at 9th and Lovejoy, which really isn't that big of a deal because it's just like one leading as you're going like westbound up the Broadway Bridge. Yeah, there's no way for them to turn around if they went that way. So there's really
everyone can just walk 2 blocks and use 13th and Lovejoy, it looks like.
Yeah. So there's really no stations that won't be serviced. The real issue, I guess, is if you take the streetcar across the Broadway Bridge, you're going to have to find another way across.
Yep. In that case, you can probably walk down and take the bus over the steel bridge.
Yeah. And then speaking of the bus, there was one bus line I saw was being disrupted. I want to say it was 17. Yeah, bus line 17 will be rerouted across the steel bridge.
Yeah, I didn't even know that TriMet ran any buses over the Broadway Bridge, I mean.
Yeah. Okay, so TriMet service alert says no service at 6th and Flanders and no service at Irving and 6th. So I think it's probably just because it's going to turn early.
Yep. And go down to the next bridge down.
Yeah. Because, it runs on the Transit Mall.
Yeah, I'm looking and there's barely any bus service in the Pearl District anyways.
Yeah. It's really just the streetcar.
The 77 kind of runs through there. Is that the one that goes over? I love using Google Maps on desktop because it really does a great job telling you where the routes go when you click on them.
Let's see, 77 goes up
sarcasm.
21st, I guess.
Okay.
I guess I knew that because I used to live over there.
Yep.
Yeah, so I guess streetcar is probably the most significant disruption. I mean, I guess if you drive over that and you live by there, but, fuck cars, so I don't really
Yep.
care. But probably will cause a little bit of traffic, especially during rush hour. A little bit of extra traffic, I should say.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always a disaster.
Probably shove some more people on the steel bridge.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, maybe it'll cause the steel bridge to collapse and they'll be forced to
they'll finally
replace
have to do
it.
something about it.
Yeah. I'm really curious. So I was looking at the satellite view just to see what the trains are going to do, the streetcars. So the A and B loop will just turn around, I guess, at Northrop. But the east side part of it's kind of interesting because there's a little crossover right before the bridge, between the bridge and
on the approach to the bridge.
Yeah. But we were talking about, I don't, more than likely the switches there need to be manually thrown.
So there's going to have to be someone sitting in a TriMet or City of Portland truck waiting for a streetcar to come over so they can throw the switches.
Yeah. So I kind of want to go over there once the closure starts just so I can watch that happen.
Yep. Normal activities.
Yeah. For nerds.
Yep.
Well, that's all I had to talk about. If you want to jump into today's episode.
But yeah, so today's episode is about the history of Max Light Rail and what's currently happening with the network. So I thought we should give an overview of what the hell is light rail and how did it come to be in Portland. So we first have to give some context because nothing happens in a vacuum. So let's go back to the 1890s when electrified streetcars were first becoming a thing. So the first electric streetcar was put into service in the United States in 1889. Electric streetcars came to Portland in about the mid 1890s. So pre-1890s, if you look at a map of Portland, or pretty much a map of any city except for maybe New York City, which had elevated steam trains, development was limited to areas that were walking distance from downtown businesses and industry. Basically, people only lived on the west side or on the very inner east side where they could walk to their jobs. When electric streetcars became a thing in the 1890s, development really took off in neighborhoods that were just outside of downtown, that were not just outside of downtown. And it created a development pattern known as the streetcar suburb. So people could commute from those suburbs into downtown or the industrial areas, wherever jobs were. And that development pattern created some of the most desirable neighborhoods that we have today because everything was pretty dense. There were nice tree-lined streets, and along the street that the streetcar ran, there were really good businesses and vibrant communities, the stuff that makes urbanists froth at the mouth these days, so to speak. The neighborhoods that were created in Portland, some examples are Alberta, Hawthorne, Clinton, Belmont, and Ankeny. And you'll notice those are all streets with a lot of fun businesses on them that hipsters like to move into. And it turns out that creating nice walkable neighborhoods oriented around transit creates vibrant neighborhoods that hipsters like. Another thing that was developed in Portland after the implementation of electric streetcars was interurbans. These were fast streetcars / trolleys that ran on city streets. But then once they got out into the suburbs, they ran on their own tracks. They could go up to 60 or more miles an hour. And there were interurban lines connecting Portland to a whole bunch of outlying areas such as Gresham, Boring, Oregon, the most exciting place ever, Forest Grove, Oregon City, Salem, and Eugene. Eugene and Salem were connected by the famous Oregon Electric Railway, which was an interurban that ran all the way from Portland to Eugene and had a branch that went to Corvallis and a whole bunch of other places. And now we have a Amtrak train that goes there twice a day and takes more time. So that's really sad. Anyway, streetcars and interurbans were pretty much present in every medium to large size city in the U.S. And there are thousands of small towns connected with interurbans. This was in the era between about 1910 and 1930. It was insane how many towns were connected with streetcars. And you'll see that in a lot of towns, there's a trail converted from a rail right-of-way called the Interurban Trail. And that's where it came from. There was an interurban that connected that town to another town next door. Next, we need to talk about why we don't have all these nice trains these days running in our cities. Why don't you think we have them, Clayton?
Because fuck cars.
Yeah, pretty much. So streetcar companies had a few problems. They were private companies, so they didn't receive any municipal funding. That wasn't a concept. Pretty much all public transit was private back then. And when these companies built their streetcar lines, they had to pay for street maintenance as part of their contracts with cities. A lot of the time, the streetcar company would build the street and then they'd get developers to build the houses just outside of the street. And another part of their contract with the city is that fares were capped by regulations and couldn't increase above a certain amount. So even like in 1940, fares were still capped at the 1910 amount at like 5 cents or whatever. So fares couldn't keep up with inflation. And then the last thing was, of course, the rise of car ownership, which led to low ridership and routes that were redundant. And streetcars got stuck in traffic all the time. We know all about that from street railways these days. And a lot of the streetcar companies ended up just switching to motor buses when those became a thing. And a lot of people know about the whole General Motors streetcar conspiracy in Los Angeles in the 90s, where there was a conspiracy that they bought up all the streetcar lines into a conglomerate called National City Lines and then purposefully converted them to buses. That might be true, but also these streetcar companies were locked into terrible deals with the cities. I'm starting to sound like a certain person who's talking about terrible deals. It's the worst deal. Yeah, fuck. Anyway, and they had to pay for street maintenance, and it was just a whole variety of factors. The last streetcar line was converted to buses in 1950 in Portland, and the last interurban ran in 1958. So it wasn't really that long ago that we had better transit, which is kind of interesting. When talking about light rail, you might hear about the term legacy systems, which refers to systems in the U.S. that survived and weren't replaced by buses. There's three major ones, which was Philadelphia, Boston, and San Francisco. Their streetcar networks survived from the golden age in the 1910s and 20s to this day. And that was basically because all three of those systems had significant tunneling in their downtowns or under geographic features, and buses couldn't use those tunnels. So they kept running streetcars. Boston and San Francisco later upgraded their streetcar systems to light rail standards, and Philly is still running really silly looking single unit trams and boarding people from the street, but those things can haul ass around curves, so it's worth it. Anyway, let's talk about what light rail is. Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't have to do with the weight of the rail vehicles. Light rail vehicles are still really fucking heavy. It goes down to the operational patterns, and it can be traced back to Germany in the 1960s and 70s. So a lot of German cities had tram or streetcar systems. They were really run down. So in order to improve transit capacity, they upgraded a lot of these lines. They added fancier stations. They increased stop spacing so the trains wouldn't have to stop so often. And most importantly, they added really long rapid transit style segments out into the suburbs, which meant grade separation. The trams could go really fast, and that might sound familiar because that's pretty much what light rail is. And that it also included dedicated lanes, which meant that trains wouldn't get stuck in traffic. One key thing that they did was they added tunneled segments in city centers, and they intended these systems to be upgraded to full metro standards eventually. But a lot of that didn't happen. A lot of this was just done really cheaply because the German economy wasn't that great after World War II. And this was a good way to get a lot of good transit really cheaply. And this technology was called Stadtbahn, which means city railway or city train. And some examples of Stadtbahn networks that exist to this day are in Cologne, Stuttgart, Essen, Dortmund, Frankfurt, and Hanover, as well as a whole bunch of other systems throughout Germany. It's really cool because it's pretty much just light rail on steroids. It goes through tunnels. It goes really fast. Most of it is level boarding, high floor vehicles. It's cool stuff. This technology gets adopted in the United States by the first time by the San Diego Trolley. This system was the first light rail system in the U.S. It took heavy inspiration from German systems. It used imported Stadtbahn vehicles. They imported the Siemens light rail vehicles that were used in Germany, and they used a lot of the same operating characteristics, and that they ran in the street in dedicated lanes in city centers. Outside of the city centers, they used freight rail right-of-ways for rapid transit style segments. The trains got to go really fast, and you basically got transit that was really cheap to build and could go at high speeds and wasn't very disruptive. And the US really liked that in the early 80s when this was open. Let's talk about how that relates to MAX. Clayton, would you like to talk about how the MAX light rail system came to be?
Yeah. So as John was saying, as basically the old historic streetcar lines were phasing out in favors of cars, this also was around the time that freeways were being built like crazy.
More lanes.
Yes. The infamous Robert Moses was consulted for the Portland area, and he made a large freeway plan. I think it was like 14 new highways in the area. One of those highways was the Mount Hood Freeway. That was going to run out of southeast Portland, pretty close to where the Markham Bridge is over the Willamette River. And that was going to run all the way down to Sandy, and that would run along the current Powell Boulevard that we have today for the most part. It would kind of run parallel to that. So during the planning of that and some of the initial construction and right-of-way acquisition, there was a large freeway revolt in Portland. So this was the late 60s, early 70s. And that led to the cancellation of not only the Mount Hood Freeway, but other freeways. So really the whole history of like the freeway revolts here are really interesting. And there's a lot of leftover like remnants of all of these freeways. So the Mount Hood Freeway specifically, there was, you can kind of see on the Markham Bridge, there's a couple stubs that would have fed into it.
Yeah, you can see a ramp that goes nowhere when you're going north on the Markham Bridge.
Yeah. There's also a section southeast of Gresham, pretty much right as you leave the actual town. So this is on Highway 26, where you can see basically like half of an interchange there. You can see where they kind of swept the curve out if you're heading east on 26. And that's where it would have connected into the Mount Hood Freeway.
Yep.
So that and this kind of expressway from Gresham all the way to Sandy that Highway 26 runs on is technically part of that project. So
yeah, that's the segment that actually was built.
Yeah. So that's about as far as they got before the construction was canceled.
And if you want further reading on the Mount Hood Freeway, the YouTuber Peter Dibble has a really good video about Portland's unbuilt freeways. We could link that in the show notes if we fucking remember.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'll try to remember. But yeah, I mean, it's a great video. If I remember, it's fairly long, but it's definitely worth the watch. It was very interesting. But yeah, so that was the Mount Hood Freeway that got canceled. Some of the funds for that went into constructing that first initial segment of MAX.
Yeah, under the greatest president, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who loved talking about his big penis. He allowed some funds from the federal interstate highways or whatever to be diverted into mass transit. They were allowed to use those funds for not more lanes.
Yeah. So, like we said, the initial segment of MAX ran from Gresham to downtown Portland. The segment through the Banfield ran adjacent to I-84 and also used some freight rail right of way. And then it also used a abandoned interurban line that ran along Burnside from Ruby Junction to Gresham. And then when they extended it to Hillsborough, I believe we mentioned last week, it uses the Robertson Tunnel, which includes the deepest subway station in North America. It runs alongside Highway 26 for a pretty short distance. It's pretty much from where it comes out of the Robertson Tunnel to Sunset Transit Center. Then it turns southbound for a little bit and runs alongside Highway 217. And then it runs along a abandoned interurban right of way from Beaverton Transit Center all the way out to Hillsborough.
Yeah, like I said, Portland had a whole bunch of these interurbans going to the outlying towns, and this was great when they built Max because we already have areas where there was rail, and we could just slap down some rails, and there we go.
Yeah. And if you look at like Google Maps or a detailed map of the Max system, you can kind of see like at Beaverton Transit Center, it has some pretty sharp curves where it's kind of trying to get through different like property lines, areas that they were able to purchase. And then you can see where it has like a very straight line heading northwest a bit, and that's where it kind of transitions onto that interurban right of way. So they were able to make a very straight section of rail there, so you can kind of see where they had to acquire some land versus where they were able to use that right of way.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the red line. So when I-205 was built, they had kind of saved some land, some of it in the median and then on either side of it, for a busway that they're planning on building.
It was part of the compromise of building the 205, because the 205 was built well into the era where people were done with more freeways. So they said, okay, we'll build the freeway, but we'll also build a busway.
Yeah. And then that busway transitioned into Max. So the first section that utilized that busway was the red line, which runs on the east side of 205 north of Gateway. It kind of runs into the weird plot of land that's between I-84 and 205.
Yeah.
And then it crosses underneath the northbound section of 205 and then runs in the median of 205. It has one stop in the median of Sunset Transit Center.
The fascinating thing is that tunnel it goes through was built in the 1970s when they built 205, and it was abandoned for 30 years until they actually built the red line.
Yeah. And sorry, I said Sunset Transit Center. I meant Park Rose Sumner Transit Center. And then it continues running into the median for about half a mile more north, and then it crosses over the southbound side, and then it runs by Cascade Station and kind of snakes through there over to the airport. And then I'm going to jump ahead a little. So I'm going to skip the yellow line for a second. The green line used the rest of the I-205 busway heading southbound. So because Gateway Transit Center is on the east side of 205, it stays on the east side for probably a little over a mile, has one stop at Main Street, and then it crosses underneath. Was that tunnel also there?
Yes, it was. That one was also from the 70s, which is, I don't know, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, so it crosses underneath 205 again, but instead of running in the median this time, it just goes completely underneath to the west side. And then it just runs parallel to 205 the rest of the way of its alignment all the way down to Clackamas Town Center. And then prior to the green line opening, the yellow line, that pretty much exclusively used the median of Interstate Avenue. There's a very short segment at the very north end of it where
it runs on its own viaduct thing. And then it can get up to 55 for half a mile.
Yeah. It speeds up a little bit, and then it slow down for the stop, and then it probably only gets up to like 40 or 45 heading up to Expo Center, because it runs parallel to I-5 for the remainder, but it has like a pretty sharp curve to avoid the interchange with 99E.
Yep.
And then the remainder of it, for the most part, heading south of there is in the median of Interstate Avenue before it turns westbound over the Steel Bridge, and then it followed existing street running tracks through downtown until the green line opened and still ran on street running tracks, but they
Yeah,
rerouted
they
it.
utilized the transit mall.
Yeah. And then finally, when they created the Orange Line extension, it mostly used a mix of freight rail right of way and an abandoned interurban. There is a section where they ran it down 17th Avenue.
Yeah, 17th Avenue.
So they run it down the median. Well, first as they left downtown, so it was running. It extends from the Transit Mall, so it runs down the median of Lincoln Street, and then it runs over a new viaduct that they built. I think they call it the Harbor Viaduct.
Yeah.
From it starts at NATO Parkway. It runs over Harbor Drive, which is another remnant of a freeway.
Yeah.
In downtown. And then it runs down, kind of snakes under I-5, has some weird curves as it avoids some.
Yeah, it kind of has to thread the needle underneath the freeway, but over a bunch of surface streets.
Yeah. And then it makes a extremely sharp turn to cross Moody Ave. And then it has a 4-track stop with the Portland streetcar at the waterfront there. So the MAX uses the outer tracks there, and the streetcar uses the inner tracks. Oddly enough, when the streetcar opened, or I shouldn't say when the streetcar opened, when the stop opened and the streetcar started running through here. So the A and B loops stop at the new station there with the MAX, and then they go over the Tillicum Crossing. And then the NS line stops just north of there in front of, which is now the OHSU School of Dentistry. I think that opened after.
Moody and Mead North.
Yeah, I think that the OHSU thing opened after this station did. So it's kind of empty there for a bit. But the A and B line also used to stop at Moody and Mead North and South. So the stops were like less than a block away from each other. So they've actually now they don't stop at this South Waterfront station anymore. They just roll through there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense because they wanted to cut one of those stations, and I guess they decided that the one that shares with the NS line made more sense for transfers.
At least it's good for buses, so buses don't have to wait for the streetcar to sit there.
Well,
well,
at least the last time I saw it, which I admit has been a while, but the streetcar would still have to stop at the same platform where it would stop to pick up passengers and call the signal, and then wait for, I'm guessing it has to wait for the switch to change for the MAX.
Yep.
So, and if a MAX train just went through, then it has to wait for the block to clear. So sometimes I'd be standing there and I'd see a streetcar pull up, and it would sit there for a good 2-3 minutes waiting for the signal to change. Meanwhile, it's blocking the bus platform.
Yep. A bunch of buses pull up behind it.
Yeah. So they definitely, maybe they have by now, but if they haven't, they need to fix the signal timing so it just can roll straight through there.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of screwed up.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's an interesting kind of combo stop there with the streetcar. There's also a insanely tight curve that the streetcar has to go through to join with the tracks going over the Tillicum Crossing.
Oh, yeah.
For absolutely no reason. Because if you look at the aerial view, you can see where they could have just made a nice switch going cleanly off the main line there, but they chose not to. So then both the streetcar and the Orange Line continue over the Tillicum Crossing, which was built as part of the Orange Line expansion, but it gets to service the streetcar as well as several bus lines. Most of the bus lines that take it now used to go over the Ross Island Bridge. So they get to avoid a lot of peak traffic on there because it can get really backed up during rush hour.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, the Orange Line takes an interesting path leaving downtown. Then it joins the freight rail right of way. You probably know more about this section here than I do because it runs along the Union Pacific right of way.
Yep.
But I imagine they had to do some pretty extensive work there with at least with the crossings.
I don't know. I don't know a lot about how they configured that whole thing.
Yeah, because I know through there, so it's essentially a 4-track section. 2 tracks are the UP tracks, 2 are the Max tracks. The signals are, or I should say, the crossings are linked together. So because the tracks are so close, if a train is going over any of the 4 tracks, regardless if it's a freight train or Max train, the crossing just blocks off the whole thing. And so you can never really tell, like if you see the crossing on, you never really know, was that a freight train coming? Is it a Max train? What's going on? And the freight trains run ridiculously slow through there and frequently just completely stop, blocking the roads there. And there's a pretty significant road crossing there where there's 11th and 12th Avenue.
Yeah, exactly. Some pretty major streets. It's also a major cycling route. There's a lot of cyclists going down Clinton that are trying to get over to South Waterfront. And there have been quite a few collisions between trains and cyclists because they think there's a freight train coming, but it's actually a Max train, which is not going painfully slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can say firsthand, I used to be a cyclist that would go through Clinton and I would ride over the Tillicum Crossing. So I would go through this area. I personally, at least twice, pulled up there, saw the crossing on, looked, saw it was a freight train, and hurried across the crossing because the freight train is going so slow. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to hurry across. Luckily, I mean, nothing ever happened. But in multiple of the cases where a cyclist has been hit there, it's because they saw a freight train, thought, oh, I got time to cross, and didn't notice the Max train that was also coming at the exact same time and going much faster. So
yeah,
kind of a mess through there. I'm assuming, back to what I was initially saying, I'm assuming they had to coordinate a lot with UP to get their
I'm
tracks
looking
in
at
there.
a lot of the street view. It looks like they didn't shift anything over. It looks like TriMet just acquired all the right of way south of the UP tracks. It looks like the UP tracks just stayed in the same place, but they did reconfigure where 11th and 12th are, so it's a little less janky.
Okay.
There used to be like a 4-way stop in the middle of the railroad crossing, which is always a recipe for success.
Yeah, that sounds like that section over off of that Highway 30 by, I think it's Lombard and Columbia over there.
Yeah.
There's like so many 4-way stops right by the crossing there.
And trains don't go slow through there either.
No, I guess there's only one, like, now I'm looking, there's like that one really bad one at 11th Avenue. Where there's like Lombard Street, Lombard Place, and 11th Avenue all meet. And I've gone through there a couple times and I've seen cars that just completely ignore the crossing there and just stop on the tracks waiting for that light to change.
Yeah.
Like, you better hope the train doesn't come. Okay, back to the Orange Line.
Yeah.
So that continues down. That's when it runs in the median of 17th Avenue, is right south of the area we were just talking about. It leaves the UP right of way. Kind of has to, because then they have this huge intermodal yard. So they really wouldn't have been able to run through there. So it runs down 17th Avenue for about a mile, I'd say.
Yep.
Just
Then
eyeballing
it cuts over and rejoins the UP right of way, and goes down the section by Eastmoreland,
Yeah.
and has the only other grid separated station outside of the 82nd Avenue and the Robertson Tunnel, which is Bybee Boulevard, which is kind of cool. Then it has the really janky stop at Johnson Creek where it has to crawl through 2 curves proceeding.
Yeah. This goes like 10 miles per hour through there.
But it's okay because the trains are stopping.
Yeah. Then it has this really like weird flyover with...
Yeah, it threads the needle between... it's the junction of where the Portland and Western Main Line leaves the Union Pacific Main Line. But you can see there's freight rail tracks on either side of the flyover. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And then it continues parallel to freight tracks there. Goes through
downtown Milwaukee, still following the Portland and Western line.
Yeah. And then it goes over a bridge over
McLaughlin.
This is called. Yeah, and Kellogg Creek, I guess, is what this is called.
Yeah.
Yeah, then
but that's where it transitions from the freight rail Portland Western to the old interurban line that went to Oregon City originally.
Yeah, it uses that for like a mile, maybe.
Yeah.
And then it ends at
and
Park
you
Ave.
can see where the trolley trail continued all the way down to Oregon City at one point.
Yeah, which it looks like it goes for maybe another mile, and then switches.
It actually ran on the street. Then it appears again.
But yeah, I see where
in Gladstone.
Yeah,
or in Jennings Law, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know the next time I play Nimby Rail, what I'm going to do is extend the our orange line through that interurban right away.
Yep. As one does.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the Max Light Rail network that we have now, besides the red line getting extended a few stops into Beaverton.
Yeah, which used the same right of way that the blue line was already using.
Okay, so let's talk about the Max Light Rail network today.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about something that if you're local, you've probably seen in the news by now, and that's TriMet's budget shortfall that they're dealing with right now. So
fun.
So this doesn't just affect Max, this is going to affect TriMet as a whole. So bus lines are going to be the main... Bus lines are actually going to be the main service that are going to see cuts, but Max will as well.
Yeah.
Essentially, TriMet right now is facing a budget shortfall of $300 million that they say must be closed over the next 3 years. Essentially up until about summer of this year, where the news of this started to really break, they've been eating into their reserves significantly.
Yeah, ever since the pandemic, when ridership dropped a whole bunch, they were not able to cover the costs of running the network with the income coming in.
Yeah. So, but they were trying to hold out until this summer, and I'll get into this in a minute, but they were hoping for a significant transportation bill to pass in the state, which did not. So that's kind of why it seems like they suddenly are like, hey, we got to make these massive service cuts. It's really been a long time coming. They just were holding out as long as they could and cannot any longer. So as John said, ridership decline is a large reason of this. Right now, they have 30 million fewer riders per year compared to 2019, so the last full year before the pandemic, which is a decline of about a third.
Yep.
So obviously, the pandemic caused a lot of the ridership decrease, especially during the pandemic. They're still seeing that because of the rise in remote work. A lot of
Max is a very downtown centric service.
Yeah.
And when a lot of people don't want to go from the suburbs to downtown, they want to go suburb to suburb. And when Max goes really painfully slow through downtown, people will choose other methods of transportation.
Yeah. So that's causing significantly less ridership. When I was doing the research for this, TriMet also stated that they did a recent survey that found nearly half of the respondents were deterred from riding Max sometimes due to safety concerns. So both of those, or the decreased ridership in general, has caused the subsidy per ride to soar from $1.77 in 2014 to $7.88 last year.
Yeah.
So to translate, that basically is meaning every single person that rides, it costs TriMet that amount to subsidize them riding. So when it's $1.77, and I don't know what fare was in 2014, but let's just say
I think it was still about $2.50.
Yeah. So at $2.50, they're actually making roughly 75 cents per rider. But with fares at less than $3 right now, and they're having to spend almost $8 just to subsidize the fare of the rider, they're losing more than twice the amount that they're being paid. Assuming the person's paying the fare too, because fare evasion is a problem that TriMet is also facing right now.
It's a proof of payment service. People can hop on and not pay if they want. All the power to them.
So in addition to decreased revenue from ridership, their operating costs are also up significantly. So they've reported their cost is up 53%, mostly due to inflation. So that pretty much anything they need to purchase to run the system. So vehicles themselves, tires for the buses, fuel, parts, track components, even paying for the electricity for Max and for their facilities. Costs for all of that, as I'm sure everyone knows, have gone up a lot. It costs a lot more to just live as a human being right now than it did pre-pandemic.
And TriMet is one giant human being.
Yeah. So in addition to that, they also have rising labor costs, so that not only are their operators and other staff, and they have rising union contracts, things like that. There are contractors that they have to hire for, let's just say, this upcoming closure that they have, where they're going to do the work on the Red Line and over at 82nd Avenue. The cost of paying those contractors has also gone up significantly. Their infrastructure is also aging, so that includes the rails, which they're doing, like I said, a project this week to replace.
So some curves that wear out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And just a little while ago, they replaced a whole section of rail and tie through the Banfield corridor.
Yeah.
That was a lot of material cost.
There was that closure on the east side over by like Ruby Junction.
Yeah.
They just did the Robertson Tunnel project where they replaced some rail. I think really it was just rail on the kind of crossovers on either side. But I think there was some work in the tunnels as well.
And it's a great thing that we still manufacture lots of steel in the U.S.
Yeah. U.S. first.
Yeah.
America First, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So the final kind of cost increase there is, as I said, they were saying that over half of their, or nearly half their respondents were deterred from riding Max due to safety concerns. So they've been trying to improve in that area. So they've tripled their security budget over the last several years. They also added unarmed security guards to the network in 2023.
There's a lot of rider ambassadors wandering around in big clumps that don't really do anything and don't really make people feel that much safer.
Yeah.
Because they basically just stand around on their phones all day, but that's a separate thing.
Yeah. But they have to pay those people.
Yeah.
And they've contracted, so there's the rider ambassadors that work for TriMet. They've also contracted security through Allied, I think is the company.
Okay.
So the people that you see that have, usually they're wearing some sort of like high-vis gear and it says transit security on the back. I think they pretty much exclusively work for Allied. So it's all a third-party company, which I don't know if that costs more or saves them money. Who knows? But it's costing them money to do all that. So they've had a lot of increased costs over the last several years, decreased revenue from ridership. It's all kind of contributed to a budget shortfall. Now, like I said, there was legislator that was they were hoping it was going to pass in the summer. It's called House Bill 2025. There was a lot of things in that. There was funding for ODOT. One of the main things I was seeing in the news after that failed was that a significant amount of ODOT maintenance workers were going to be laid off. I think it was like 600 or something.
Yep. So nothing would get plowed.
Yeah. So the biggest impact we were going to see short term was a lot of the roads that become impassable during the wintertime were going to remain impassable because they weren't going to be plowed and salted and things like that. So as far as I know, the layoffs were paused because I think the governor stepped in and was able to pause that.
For ODOT, but not TriMet.
Right, yeah, just for ODOT. And then that was to hold out for another bill, which did just pass. I think it was about a week ago, maybe a little over a week. It was House Bill 3991. Provided a few things. It did give some money to ODOT. I can't tell you what that's really going to look like compared to the original bill. Like what if that's going to still save jobs or what it's going to entail. As far as the TriMet and just public transit in general, the only thing it really did was double the payroll tax. So right now, if you, I don't know if it's across the whole state or if it's just this area, but you pay 0.1% tax to fund public transit.
It's doubling to 0.2%.
Yeah, but only until January 1st of 2028. So the problem with that, what TriMet said, was doubling that only generates a fraction of the revenue they need to fully prevent service cuts. I think I read they estimated they would need it would need to be 0.5% to offset their budget shortfall. So 0.2% helps a little, but doesn't do a whole lot. And it's also only temporary. So once this runs out in 2028, we're back where we were. So
exactly,
there's hope that future legislature will help more, but where we stand right now, it's
not looking
much.
very great. Yeah.
And
it's also important to mention that a lot of the federal funding that's coming in is for capital improvements, such as the new FX line on Second Avenue. But that will not fund operations at all, which is where TriMet is facing the biggest budget shortfall.
Yeah. And there's also concern. I mean, there hasn't been, from what I've seen, any direct, I'll put it as threat to cut that funding as well. But I think that's on the back of some people's minds that might get cut as well.
Yep.
Given the current state that we're in. But yeah, as you said, I mean, it's not funding any of their operational needs. So it still puts them in quite a bind.
Yep.
So according to TriMet, cuts are going to begin next month with at least a 10% cut expected by August of 2027. However, depending on what happens between now and then, or rather what doesn't happen, the cuts could end up being significantly larger than 10%.
Yeah.
I've seen numbers thrown out that were like almost up to like 50%, even more, depending on if further funding is not found, if ridership doesn't grow at all, or if it decreases.
Yeah. It's just not looking good.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to add that number I found, the 10%, all that, that was published prior to House Bill, the current one that just passed like a week ago, being passed. So it might push back some of those deeper service cuts because they're saying August 2027. But like we said, the payroll tax is only going until January 1st of 2028. So if anything, right now, the deep cuts are only going to get pushed back by a few months.
Yeah.
So starting next month, I believe this was at the end of November, so we still have like a month and a half until then. There's going to be cuts to some frequency on bus lines. So FX2, which is the
Frequent Express on Division Avenue.
Yeah, it's the in air quotes bus rapid transit line that we have here, and that they're building another one on 82nd Avenue. But that is going to decrease to buses will arrive every 24 to 35 minutes before 7 a.m. and after 7 p.m. every day.
Good thing no one needs to travel during those times.
Yeah, everyone works 9 to 5, so
yep.
You'll be. I don't even know why people are freaking out about this. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, in all seriousness, this is a serious cut because I don't know when it starts at 12-minute frequencies, but it's actually even more than that, I think, during rush hour.
Yeah, it's about every 10 minutes during rush hour, as far as I know.
Yeah, so outside of rush hour, I think it's every 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And that, I guess I gotta look at the schedule, but from what I know, that starts pretty early and it runs pretty late, the 12-minute frequencies. So
yep, exactly.
And I mean, so 24 doubles that, and then 35 minutes is pretty significant.
Yeah, exactly. That's worse than a lot of local bus services.
Yeah. And speaking of local bus services, at least 4 lines, so for sure 4 lines are going to, but from what I was reading, they may increase that over the next couple of weeks. They might announce another line or 2. But service will be reduced to once an hour after 9 p.m.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah. So that's going to be line 35, line 52, line 77, and line 81. So after 9 p.m., those buses are only coming every hour.
And the Route 35 splits south of South Nevada Street in Southwest Portland. So that'll be every 2 hours after 9 p.m. on each of those branches. So that's really fun.
Yeah.
So good luck getting a bus in Southwest Portland now.
Yeah. So that's all that's confirmed to happen at the end of the month. Like I said, they may add a couple more bus lines to the reduced frequency in the evenings. I would imagine if they're going to do that, they're going to announce it fairly shortly. But everything from this point on is all proposed. And so there's still like a public comment period that they're doing to see what people's preferences are. So I guess basically you can go up there and be like, well, I take Route 77, so cut anything but that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So I guess they really just want to hear from people like, what do you want them to keep, and of their proposed changes, what don't you like? March of 2026, they're somewhat generic or kind of generalized about what they're saying, but they have actually said some
a lot of the
specific
stuff they're
things.
just throwing out to be like, this is what'll happen if we don't get funding.
Yeah. So their more generic stuff is just saying we're eliminating some bus lines with low ridership, eliminating evening service on other low ridership bus lines, and or changing routes on some bus lines to increase efficiency. Now, they have said that a proposed change is reducing frequencies on routes 8, 48, 75, and 76. They haven't really gone into much detail.
Route 75 is a pretty high ridership line, so that doesn't...
Yeah. I think 8 is too.
Yeah.
I don't know 48 and 76 well, but yeah, so I don't know if that's kind of similar to after 9 p.m. or before 7 a.m., after 7 p.m.
But that's pretty worrying because that's the core of their network.
Yeah. The other major proposed change is the Max Green Line will be shortened to only serve stations between Clackamas Town Center and Gateway Transit Center. So that means that through that section, service will remain the same, but the Banfield corridor will have less frequency. And
it'll basically have trains every 7 minutes instead of every 5 minutes or so.
Yeah. So a little bit reduced frequency on the Banfield corridor, and reduced frequency in downtown. It also means if you're boarding a Green Line train somewhere between Gateway and, well, really Clackamas Town Center and Gateway if you're heading north.
Yeah, you have to transfer at Gateway to another train to continue farther north or farther west.
Yeah. So if you currently take a 1-seat ride from, let's say, Clackamas Town Center to Rose Quarter Transit Center, you won't be anymore.
Yep. You'll be transferring to the red or blue line.
Yep. And then, so this was posted prior to that House bill passing. So the dates they gave were sometime between May 2026 to August 2027.
Yep.
So I imagine that this part might get pushed out a little, but we'll see. All of this is just kind of their generic, this may happen next year type stuff, but they're saying additional cuts to frequency on at least a dozen bus lines, significant elimination of other bus lines, or at least portions of the lines. So I've seen some pretty high numbers that they were throwing out.
Yeah, it's looked pretty bad.
Yeah. I think I texted you when I saw one of them.
Yeah.
Said...
It looked, I seem to remember it was like it was like 30% of bus lines were going to get cut or something, or 30% of all service.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were going to cut 34 of the 78 bus lines by 2027 if long-term funding isn't passed.
Yeah.
And it would increase to 51 lines by 2031, which is over half of the lines.
Yeah. So that's insane.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to... I mean, we're obviously going to see probably some bus lines being cut entirely. But I really hope we don't see that significant of an elimination. I hope something happens that will prevent that.
But hopefully they keep throwing out scary numbers so that legislators wake up and stop sitting on their
Yeah. But then, as I was researching this, I found a couple articles that basically were just saying, like, let it burn, that TriMet is seeing essentially no one wants to ride their system, so they should just cut it all, as the public is showing they want.
Yeah, and as you can see, traffic in Portland is just getting better by the day. So if that does happen, they'll soon see, I guess.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, that's an insane take, but great. So they're also talking about reducing frequency on all MAX lines and reduction in Lyft paratransit service as well. So again, all of it's kind of generic. Past March 2026, they aren't really giving anything concrete. I think they're kind of waiting to see what happens. They're also waiting to hear from riders about what they think of the service cuts. Obviously, no one's going to be
thrilled.
No. But they are holding a lot of like town hall events. Most of them are virtual, it looks like. So if you do want to share your thoughts with them, and I highly recommend you do, I'm trying to find it on their website.
Yeah, you kind of got to dig through. Maybe we can link something in the show notes to find town halls.
Yeah. If you're listening and don't see it in there, it looks like it's trimet.org/service cuts. There's a survey that you can take to weigh in on the potential service cuts. And then they also, farther down on the page, they have dates and information about their upcoming open houses. So there's virtual ones. There's only a couple more virtual ones.
And another thing you could do is yell at your legislators about how eliminating transit will make traffic a lot worse.
Yeah.
And make our region grind to a halt.
Yeah. And hopefully they listen to you.
Uh-huh. Anyway, would you like to talk about some bus lanes in Oregon City?
Yeah, it's not exactly Oregon City. I just put that as like a reminder for me. But so I was driving in Oregon, leaving Oregon City when I saw this. And so that was kind of my reminder to talk about this.
Okay.
So I was driving south on 205, and pretty much as I was exiting Oregon City out of that like work zone they have there for the Abernathy Bridge, I saw that they had just very recently restriped the shoulder for bus only shoulder lane.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so that goes all the way to Stafford Road, so it's about 5 miles or so.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I was like, this is interesting. So I looked it up, and ODOT has a page about it. It's the I-205 Clackamas County bus on shoulder.
I don't know of any bus lines that use that segment of freeway.
Yeah, so I don't know. This is kind of weird. So they said it's in collaboration with South Metro Area Regional Transit, which the acronym is SMART buses, which is the transit network in Wilsonville. They're the only operator that's allowed to use the shoulder.
Interesting.
They already are allowed to use the shoulder between on I-5 between Tualatin and Wilsonville. There's like a 2-mile segment between the 205 interchange and
interesting. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, there's like that first exit in Wilsonville, Ellickson Road, I guess.
Okay.
Traffic, especially going southbound, gets really backed up there in the afternoon.
Okay.
So there's a bus line that runs from a smart bus line that runs from
As opposed to
What's
the
it
dumb
called?
bus.
yeah, Tualatin Park and Ride to Wilsonville Transit Center. So it's able to use that shoulder and bypass a lot of the traffic there.
Okay.
So they already use bus on shoulder. But what is weird is, from everything I could find, there is no bus line that goes on 205.
So that could potentially be a future service expansion.
Yeah. I mean, right now, this is expected to be ready to use by the end of the year, because when I drove through there the other day, they had the striping done, but there were no signs up. And they said that it's actually supposed to be over by the 11th, so in 2 days.
Okay.
They're supposed to have all the signage up. So I'm not sure, according to like...
If anyone will use that.
Yeah. According to like Smart's website, they do have like paratransit buses that will take people into Portland and other places for, like, you have to schedule it ahead of time, and they'll take you to like doctor's appointments, things like that. So I guess if you're taking one of those into like Oregon City from Wilsonville, then
maybe
that might get to use it, but I could not find any other use for them.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm looking at the smart system map right now, and there's nothing that runs on 205.
Yeah. So
it's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you know
more about the smart bus running on 205, let us know. Comment those YouTube. I guess that's the only way to contact us right now.
Well, I was gonna say I did set up an email. So
okay. Oh, fancy.
Yeah, so it's the 503 line at gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you want to connect with us about 205 bus lane, or bus on shoulder, I should say, project, email us there, or email us about anything else, I guess.
Okay.
Correct us when we're wrong on stuff, or just tell us what you want to hear on the show.
Okay.
Again, that's the 503 line at gmail.com.
Very nice.
Yeah. And we're pretty much live on just about every podcast platform that most people, I think, know about. I'm sure there's some obscure ones that I don't know about that we're not on, but
yeah.
And of course, we're on YouTube. So yeah, that's how to connect with us for now, at least.
Yeah. Well, like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Engage in all the classic ways.
Yeah.
Hunt us down like dogs.
Please don't do that. Don't show up at my house.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
Nope. That's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, I think this is it for episode 2.
I'll see all you fuckers later.
Yeah. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye.